Hello, welcome to another episode of Namtaro Talks. This episode will pick up from the previous episode of my talking about traveling. As I talked about in the previous episode, this one will focus more about the trips to Asia, namely Vietnam, China, and Japan. And I will also conclude the episode by my general opinions about traveling itself. I'll begin with Vietnam. I recall that I've been to Vietnam at least 5 times by now. I can recall easily the grades I was in when I went to Vietnam, that being first grade, third grade, seventh grade, and 11th grade, and my recent trip to Vietnam last year. And though I don't remember every single detail of each trip, I have a general idea of the different contexts of each trip and my experiences each time. Though it might be a bit unfair and biased, that I have a lot more to recall and reflect upon with my most recent trip. Of course, the first trip being in first grade. I don't remember if it was 2.5 or 3 weeks out of school. Yeah, it was leading into Christmas break. I think that was the one where I spent Christmas in Vietnam also. All I knew was that I'm Vietnamese, and yeah, honestly, at this point, you pretty much know that I'm Vietnamese. And like I say in previous episode, I try not to disclose too much personal information, but it's like on a need to know basis, and it pertains to the context of the podcast. But at that point, I knew I was Vietnamese. I knew some of the Vietnamese language. I had no idea how much I would be able to hold my own in Vietnam. I would pretty much depend entirely on my parents, of course. And I knew that a flight from America to Vietnam from where I stayed at would be about 17 or 18 hours, so I was ready for a long flight, of course. It was my first international flight. I even remember the airlines. It was called Ava Airlines. I don't even think they exist anymore. But being in first grade, they gave me some makeup schoolwork, but I think the main thing I had to do was pretty much keep a journal of my trip, well, as best as I could in the context of a first grader anyways. And of course, when you first arrive, first arrival, arrived in Saigon. Nowadays they call it Ho Chi Minh City, but I call it Saigon because that's what I'm used to when it's easier for me. And at Tan Son Nhut Airport, and they still have the things where they have people wait at the front for you to greet you when you arrive. And it was a lot of firsts. It was a lot of firsts experiencing that humid climate and getting bitten by mosquitoes and riding in a saddle, which is like those white vans that can take multiple people. And we just rode to my dad's hometown and went back to his childhood home where we stayed for most of the duration of the trip. But I just played it by ear. I just went along with everything my parents did, and I used my Vietnamese to the best of my ability. And of course, I had a cousin who was slightly older than me, and he was showing me around a little bit. Honestly, I might get the first grade and the third grade trip a little bit mixed up, but that's expected. Yeah, so I had one cousin who was slightly older, one cousin who was, I would say, 3 or 4 years older. I don't remember how much older he is, but they took us on bike rides. They got to play with their neighborhood friends. I remember one session, of course, I was younger than them, so I just like stayed in the background, hung out, and they play a lot of hacky sack with the feathers, and they play, well, badminton, of course, but there was a lot of studying, and they just break out the tables, break out the chairs, and hang out on the roof too, and a lot of soccer too. I remember that. Anywhere that's open space, and you just get some slippers, you set up as the goals, and you have a soccer game right there. Of course, I was not very good at soccer, but I held my own as best as I could. And of course, my paternal grandma was still alive at the time, and unfortunately she had dementia, so she was a bit erratic at times, so I wasn't able to understand her condition or bond with her as much. Yeah, of course, there was the dad's the family home, and about a few blocks down was my uncle's home, and he was a pharmacist, so he also ran. There was pictures of us climbing trees, hanging on trees, lots of fruit, eating fruit. A few years later, I went on that tour again, and I bought some kind of honey, but unfortunately, it was too thick and sticky, and it tasted good there, but it didn't really last very well when I brought it back home to America. But that was much later. That was 7th or 11th grade. I remember playing a lot of card games with my cousins. I remember drinking a lot of Vina milk, which was their main brand of milk there at the time. Well, and it really developed many years later. I remember you had to drink a pack of 3 Vina milk in order to get one Doraemon comic book. Of course, my Vietnamese literacy was limited, so I just went along with the pictures. You're immersed in that environment, so you have no choice but to speak Vietnamese. I enjoyed the rides on the bicycle. I enjoyed the rides on the mopeds, motorbikes. Of course, I'm ashamed to say that during all my trips to Vietnam, I never drove a motorbike myself. I attempted to ride a bicycle several times, but that was a challenging experience to say the least, but that's a little bit more for later. I remember going to a video game cafe with my cousins, and they had some old TVs and old consoles. We played mainly PS1 games. I remember at least 2 games. One was called Crisby. It's like a side-scrolling beat-em-up game, though it wasn't as popular in America. And of course, there was Soul Calibur 1. And I remember my brother was dominating with Song Mina, because all he literally did was press one button and he just like killed everybody with that character. I remember getting sick one time and I had like a major fever in my dad's hometown. I don't know, they couldn't take care of me as best then, so they had to drive me all the way back to Saigon, where I was taken care of better then, and I eventually recovered. But that was in first grade for sure. In third grade and progressing to 7th grade, honestly, everything begins to blend more together. Family began to branch out with the exploration and tourism and visiting different regions of Vietnam. Several regions we hit up were Vũng Tàu and Đà Lạt and Nha Trang. Some places had different climates or are known for different things like mountains or beaches. I remember there's one beach where there was this really like steep sandy hill that you had to like crawl your way up and down from. Even slightly smaller cities like Gakong and Can Tho, I remember going to those. I don't remember if we went to Phu Quoc. I remember driving by a city. Well, I didn't drive. I was in the Serdal, and it was a city that was known for making nước mắm. They had like barrels and jars full of nước mắm fermented for years. It was like pretty much the pungent, dominant smell of the city. But then again, you can say that about Vietnam anywhere. But that is the known smell. Oh, yeah, nước mắm or fish sauce for my non-Vietnamese audience. Like a Vietnamese cooking staple. Oh, for Filipinos too, surprisingly. I remember climbing a whole bunch of stairs in order to get to this really huge cave. And everyone in the family was tired. Even the young people, like my cousin, my brother, and I were tired. The only person who was still willing to go and climb was my uncle. And he was in his 70s at the time. Yeah, but the cave was huge. It was like the biggest cave in Vietnam. And we eventually got even more ambitious. We went to other major cities in different regions of Vietnam. Oh, Hanoi, Haiphong, Hue. I don't remember we went to Da Nang. I know we went to Hoi An for sure. Unfortunately, I didn't recall much then. And of course, we went to Hat Long Bay with its famous jutting rock features. Yeah, I know I'm name dropping a lot of places, and the way I describe it, it's like Daria and Deadpan and doesn't really do the places justice. But I'm literally just recalling, it's literally from memory, if anything. Maybe there was a brief blog post in 7th or 11th grade, but that's it. But in the future trips, especially in 7th and 11th grade, I had a bit more agency. I had a lot more opportunity and was given a bit more freedom with the different things I was allowed to do. And I was an awkward teenager at the time, and the family friends, they had like 3 daughters, and they were like, I think they were older than me. Yeah, I'm sure they were older than me. But they were nice, and they took me around town and different parks and hang out with their friends and meet their family. And of course, like Vietnamese households, we give the guests a lot of fruit. I remember eating a lot of rambutan. I remember they were performers. They liked to sing, and of course, they performed a couple of songs, and I had to I was peer pressure to sing. And of course, with them being girls, they were gossipy. And there was a girl I liked back in America at the time. Well, I mean, you're like a stupid teenager, what the heck do you know? So they either pushed it and warmed it out of me, but what are they going to do? They were in Vietnam, so they got me to admit and they wished me good luck and whatnot. But yeah, it was enjoyable because it was one of the few times I was not with my parents, I didn't have to stick with their agenda. So I remember one confusing incident, maybe a cultural mistranslation, because their accent was thick, They said they want to go to, I guess, the garden or the yard, but I thought they said go to the bed. I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? I mean, I knew there were differences in accents there, but I guess, I don't know. I was just confused. I blame it on teenage stupidity. Not even hormones, just ignorance, if anything. I also remember my brother and I, we like playing the trading card game Yu-Gi-Oh at the time, and we both had our own decks. So whenever there's opportunity and we were bored, we just like whip out both of our decks and duel each other. Of course, my brother won most of the time, but I didn't really care. I just needed a fun activity to do because he won more often than I did. Every time I won, I took more pride and happiness in that, if anything. And the funny thing about these Vietnam trips, like every now and then, there was another cousin from America who happened to tag along with us, or their trip just happened to intersect with our trip. I remember one cousin, he well, just when the iPod came out, he showed us the iPod for the first time in Vietnam. I remember buying a lot of bootleg CDs and DVDs at the encouragement of my cousins in Vietnam. I remember I bought Lord of the Rings, and it was terrible quality, and it has Vietnamese subtitles with of course I wouldn't read the subtitles because they were too small anyways, and the movie was incomplete. Then I kind of realized that there's a lot of American culture that's influenced by Vietnam. Of course, they knew artists like Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears, and sing Avril Lavigne back then too. Or I even come to appreciate some Vietnamese modern music there. There was this one, a rock band called Microwave. There's one song by them that still sticks by me today. I remember having to put up the blue mosquito nets every night to not get bit by mosquitoes. And in my dad's family home, there was literally only one room that had air conditioning. Of course, that was the guest bedroom. When my brother and I were small, the whole family could literally sleep on, like, I don't know if it was a king bed or a California king. Probably not California, but yeah, we all fit on there. But as we get bigger, of course, the whole family can't share the bed, so some of us gotta take turns on sleeping in another room. But of course, that room didn't have the air conditioning, and of course, my brother and I got the aircon room at first. But then my dad got a bit upset, so we had to like switch off every now and then, which is understandable. I mean, it's hot and humid at night; it's gonna be uncomfortable to sleep, so it's only fair. You come to realize like the value of the US dollar against the Vietnamese dong and how much cheaper things were in Vietnam. So I took advantage of that and I brought back, I don't know, whatever money I could scrape together from the time from birthdays. Yeah, I bought the dumbest things. I even bought this one cap that was made out of Coca-Cola cans. And my aunt, she did Tai Chi with a sword, a wooden sword anyways. And I really liked that sword, so she gave it to me to take back to America. But of course, it was like considered oversized, so it was a bit more work to bring it back. And unfortunately, I think I lost that sword. And you convert your money, and you're like, "Oh, I'm a millionaire! Wee!" And you're so proud of that. And you get to appreciate how much the food is in Vietnam, how much a plate of rice is, how much a bowl of pho is, how much the drinks are, the smoothies are, the sugarcane juice and the coconut juice are. I remember there was that one trip to Bana Hills, but that was before they built all the tourist attraction and like the big hands with on the bridge and whatnot. Yeah, they were literally building it, and it was very run down, and there was no cable cars to take you up there. So there was like a one-way road with a whole bunch of switchbacks, and you're in this giant van. And of course, I was dizzy, my brother was dizzy and car sick. And the lodging there was terrible. We were in a hotel, and there was like the one thing we remember the most were moths the size of bats. Yeah, and they were like flying in the bathroom, and my cousin was calling me to kill it, and I threw a slipper at it, and it fell to the ground, and I grabbed a slipper and just like beat it to death. And we literally considered sleeping in the van that night. 11th grade, I think that's when more of the memories began to came back, because like I said, I had more agency. So at that point, I was more allowed to like ride the bicycle around my dad's hometown. I rode it to various stores. I rode it around the neighborhood. I rode it to the local river. I even rode it to like the house of those family friends with the daughters. Though I got lost trying to find it. I mean, I only know the street it was on and what the house kind of looked like. But I think I went too far. I almost left the town pretty much. I got to the edge of the freeway. I'm like, okay, this is way too far. And then I showed up and they're like, who's this guy? And then eventually one person recognized me, then another, and then, yeah, then they welcomed me with open arms, like more rambutan for sure. Of course, in the 11th grade, I was playing two major sports, well, cross country and badminton. So I chose to bring my own badminton rackets and badminton shoes to Vietnam and look where the badminton gyms were, and finally found it and found some local kids to play against. And they're like, I don't know, 10, 11 years old and barefoot or slippers, and they're way better than me. And I'm playing badminton in like the hot, humid environment. But it was still a fun experience on its own. And of course, with cross country, I tried jogging. But I mean, you're sweaty and tired before you even start. So and of course, when you jog, you gotta try to dodge all the motorcycles and the bikes and the cars, and the streets are not the most even either. But once you finish, you whip out your wallet and you get a couple like sugarcane drinks and smoothies, just chill at the side. And of course, you need your own taste of some Americanisms. So I remember there was a half gig MP3 player I bought from a friend for $50, and I'm very sure he ripped me off. But at that point, I wanted whatever I could get because I know my parents weren't going to get me an MP3 player, and it was just a basic drag and drop, and it had like the 90s songs, of course a lot of Linkin Park and Avril Lavigne. And I just listened to the heck of that MP3 player throughout the trip. One song I played to death was Avril Lavigne's My Happy Ending. I also remember that my dad's hometown was known for this special noodle dish, and I really liked it. However, I might have overdone it one day because I ate that dish for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. At that age, you're just going as a tourist. You're still under the guise of your family, trying to figure out your identity. And that's all I had to talk about my trips to Vietnam for the time being. I will definitely get back to this later, believe me. And I know that these episodes are on a time crunch, and that leaves me with limited time to talk about the other trips, but I will do my best regardless. I will transition to my trip to Japan. That was much later, when I was in graduate school. It was during one of the spring breaks, and we were pretty impulsive, and I just took advantage of the opportunity to go to Japan. Yeah, so we had one friend in our group who lived in Japan, but I mean, he was helpful as much as he could, and he knew some Japanese, but pretty much everyone had like a general idea and plan and did their own thing. Well, not really did their own thing, but a couple of times, but many of the things we did together. And I won't get into too much of the details and platitudes of Japan. Like, everyone knows it's clean, everyone knows they're polite, everyone knows that the subway system is super convenient. It'll be a bit more of the personal anecdotes. So we arrived, and I had a high school friend who moved back to Japan, and I reached out to hit him up, and then of course we went to our hostel, which was really clean. I remember getting one of those little pods, and they give out really fresh bread, and they give you free umbrellas in case it rains. And that friend, he met us at the hostel, and then we got to eat ramen, and then everyone went home. And then, yeah, the district where the hostel was at was called Nishiarai. Okay, yeah, so we pretty much flew in to Tokyo. Yeah, that's a given. Yeah, but then he took me to Ueno, and it was cherry blossom season, like, luckily. And yeah, we got to see those for sure. And of course, back then I did not have data roaming, so we had to buy one of those portable internet devices. So we were subject to whoever was carrying the device and had to be near that person the entire time, or else we would have to be close to areas that had Wi-Fi or like a Starbucks or something. So pretty much we had to stay in relative groups or have a trust system to meet with each other at certain times and not get lost. And that's when I was really thrown into it, like all the cool Japanese things that I've only heard about and saw in animes, and I got to experience. I got to go to Kameshita Street in Harajuku. Many people don't like it because it's too crowded or too touristy or too ridiculous and crazy. I'll be honest, that's still one of my favorite places in the world, because the culture, the fashion, the little different nuances, the stores, the funny knickknacks and interesting clothes and souvenirs that you find there. I could literally break the bank there. I could spend hundreds or thousands there if I had no restraint. Yeah, Japan, I was there for literally a week, which was a bit ridiculous. But we did as best as we could. Yeah, first time in Harajuku, Takashita, I saw a hat I liked, I saw an outfit I liked. Last day in Japan, we were back in Tokyo. Everyone did their own thing for the last day, and then before we all met up together. And I went back to those places. I bought the hat, I bought the outfit. Went to Shibuya crossing and saw how all those crazy people crossed the street all at once at a time. We were on at that giant Starbucks at the tower where you can overlook Shibuya crossing. I remember there was a Tower Records I liked, and I get to eat all the food, all the doriyaki, the takoyaki, the sushi, the rice balls. Go to all the convenience stores like the Family Marts, the 7-Elevens, the Lawson. Remember this one alcoholic beverage I like? It was called Strong Zero or something. Get to experience all the vending machines and buy my ramune and my Pocari Sweat, which saved my life, believe it or not. And surprisingly, even played pickup basketball, though the people we played with were Chinese instead of Japanese. But it was still fun. And we were playing in street clothes and after walking all around Japan too. So we were pretty much crazy about that. Yeah, I remember when we went to Tsukiji Fish Market, it was raining a lot, but we still saw all the fish products, all the giant fish, and we made our way to Osaka where we stayed at an Airbnb, and our bedroom was several bunk beds. I think 6 or 8 bunk beds. But then that was a brief time period when everyone just like split up and did their own thing for that day. Well, some people stayed in Osaka and explored it more like I did. I went to the Osaka Castle and went to Denden Town and Dotonbori. You see that giant Glico running guy did the Namba walk. I remember I ate okonomiyaki at noon and curry, chicken curry or something at 3. So I pretty much ate 2 lunches. I remember looking everywhere for the Pokemon store and finally finding it. I remember just standing at a ramen stand in the street and eating ramen, and they let you put kimchi in it. Of course, with Osaka being near Kyoto, we did a day trip in Kyoto. We went to the famous Kiyomizu-dera temple, though we didn't go to the one with all those red arches. We went to Arashiyama monkey park and that one park with all the bamboo. From Osaka, we made our way back to Tokyo, but always made a stop in Yokohama to go to the ramen museum. And then, like I said, I went to Harajuku again, and then I also went to Akihabara, which is a bunch of like electronics and anime stuff. But one of my favorite finds was the B-side label sticker store. I would remember that store and buy a couple stickers from it, and when I get back home to America, like order some of it online. And in my future trip, I would find that store in all the major cities I went to. And with our last night in Japan, we went clubbing in Shibuya, which was as fun as I said it would be. Though, and we got McDonald's afterwards. It was like 1 or 2 in the morning. Though I don't know how we got back to our hostel. I mean, I knew I drank a bit, but I did not feel good the next day. And I told them, oh my God, give me a sports drink. Give me like Gatorade or something. And they got me Pocari Sweat. And I'm like, what is this? It tastes disgusting. But I drank it anyways, and I felt so much better. But that was literally the day where we had to get to the airport and fly back. And one friend almost didn't make it back because we were all packed with our luggage except him. And he's a runner, and he was out running somewhere. So we had no idea if he was going to make the flight. But he made it with about 20 minutes to spare. And I came back to Japan several years later, but this time as a married man. And I went with my wife with us newlyweds. We relatively planned the trip, and we got our JR passes. Oh, I remember many fun things about that trip. One of my favorite was this one fiber drink that you get at 7-Eleven. And it really saved us because we did not get many vegetables in Japan. But of course, we were ambitious. We pretty much crammed like 3 weeks worth of stuff into 2 weeks. So let's see here. Cat Cafe in Shinjuku. And I checked out many different chains like a Pronto Coffee. And of course, get more stickers at B-Side Label. Otter Cafe in Shinjuku. And of course, we hit the 3 main cities. But we also hit up Hakone, where we stayed at an onsen, which is a bit more traditional. We took one of those cable car gondola things over the top to get a nice view of Lake Arai, and then we would eventually go on Lake Arai on one of those fake pirate ships. And I remember taking a complicated bus route to get to Lake Kawaguchi. Although we did not go up Mount Fuji, we saw it from a distance, and it is as beautiful as people say it is. There was one little regret from the trip, was that we did not spend more time in Kyoto, because that was one of my favorite sections of the trip. We went to Nishiki Market, which is a nice shopping area, and of course more B-side label stickers, more Pokemon centers. Unfortunately, our time in Kyoto was limited, and on that day, it was really hot. It was like 95 degrees Fahrenheit and humid, and we walked around a lot. We went, well, some places I went to before, but I was willing to go again because of how much I liked it the first time. To Arashiyama with the bridge and the monkeys and the bamboo and the Kiyomizu temple and Yasura temple. I remember we were tired, we were sweaty, we had to walk so much, and it was uphill, and I had to, luckily I had data roaming now, so I was like, oh my god, where's the nearest 7-Eleven? We gotta make it there. Make it there, like down a Pocari Sweat. Yeah, I had like 2 or 3 Pocari Sweats on me, like one to drink and maybe a couple to drink on the road. I don't even care if it's not cold anymore. But the perk about going to Japan multiple times is that you get many recommendations from friends. So there was a coffee shop in Kyoto that my friend recommended. I went to that, and then later in Nara, we went to that one also. And then we made our way over to Osaka. A couple of things that I did before, we did again, which is fine with me because it's a completely new experience. Well, it feels new to me anyways. I didn't go into the castle this time, but we went to the outside of the castle. I went to Dotonbori, Den Town, Namba Walk, all that again. Though it was much more crowded than I remember. The thing about Osaka is that it's near several other cities. So we spent 1-day trip in Nara. Of course, there you go to the temples, you see the deer. Then another day trip to Kobe. Of course, you go there, eat the Kobe beef. And Kobe is a nice shopping center, near nice piers also. And we took the JR fast bullet train back to Tokyo again. Yeah, I know, we were crazy. We were moving back and forth. We changed locations like 7 or 9 times. Not to mention the heavy suitcase. But get back to Tokyo, go to Disney Sea, go to Akihabara with its arcades, and one of my favorites is the secondhand anime shop where like the stuff is almost like new, but it's very fair price. Of course, you could easily break the bank there. And a maid cafe. I went to the Capcom store, went to Ueno again, and we arranged to meet up with my friend in Yokohama. Unfortunately, the time we went, it was during rush hour, so not only were we packed like sardines, but we were carrying our suitcase and standing for about a half hour. But make it to my friends, he took us to his suburban home, went to the ramen museum again, went to Japan's Chinatown, saw the giant Gundam in the distance, went on a giant ship. Then he took us to a lesser known seaside town called Kamakura, which was fun and pleasant also. There's a giant Buddha statue that you can go on the inside of. Okay, now I'm starting to realize that this will likely be a 3-part series. The next episode, we'll talk about my more recent trips to China and Vietnam again, this time as a grown adult who has a bit more disposable income, to say the least. But regardless, I will impart some of my opinions regarding traveling. Yeah, like I said in previous episode, I took advantage of the opportunity. Like I was in grad school at the time. I knew I didn't have much money. I knew I had like a negative net worth. I knew I had loans. But I took the trip anyways because the opportunity was there. I've always wanted to go to Japan. You hear about it, you see it so often. I even had a book about like Tokyo and Japan, and it's a bit outdated now, but it really sold me. And I know Japan feels different as a tourist than as someone who lives there. But the convenience, the cleanliness, the coffee shops, the bakeries, as I've grown to realize over time, I enjoy a little agency and independence and going out on my own sometimes during these trips, a little bit of wanderlust, whether it be walking on my own in Japan or Oakland or Virginia or near Washington D.C. area or in Vietnam Or believe it or not, a couple places in China, even with my limited poor Mandarin skills. But it's at those moments where you really fend for yourself. You're on your own level. You walk where you want. You walk as fast as you want. You don't really have to ask for permission. Of course, that's not the only thing I would like to do. I enjoy trips with multiple people because it's nice to have a base to come back to. It's nice to have companions and buddies. And especially when you're on your own and when you don't know what you're doing most of the time, where and you suck at planning and honestly, you're spoiled. It's good to have a main guide, main planner. And I understand that not everyone has the means and ability to travel, whether it be a certain phase of their life or a certain position in life. But regardless, I think the desire to travel, it's important. It should be there, whether it be local, national, or international. I mean, there's more to life than what's in your immediate environment. There's different cities, different states, different countries out there, different people, different lifestyles, different routines. Yeah, you could be happy and safe in your own bubble, and that could be all you ever know. But I'll be honest, you're missing out. And there's only so much you can know about secondhand, especially with the internet nowadays. You can watch travel blogs, you can hear secondhand experience from peers and friends or vloggers, but nothing beats the real thing. And sometimes the real thing, it's difficult, or it sucks, or you made the wrong decision, or you feel like you wasted your time. But at least it's yours, it's your memory. I admit not all my travel experiences were the funnest or most convenient. I have some duds, but I made the most of it, and those are my memories. I took pictures of it regardless. And it's also a learning experience. You feel like, okay, this is what I could have done better. Or you take mental notes like, oh, I want to come back here again. I'll do this next time. And another thing I would highly recommend is that if an opportunity presents itself when you do travel, of course, you still be judicious about it, but just take it. If there's something interesting to eat, eat it. Yeah, I think that was the motto of Bizarre Foods with Andrew Zimmern back in the day. Oh, no, it was, if it looks good, eat it. But of course, don't be stupid and eat whatever. You don't want to get food poisoning. And of course, with the travels, you got to prepare accordingly with all your clothes and essentials and food and water and money and important documents. And I wouldn't say you need a set strict schedule or a plan, but a relative idea, like kind of familiarize yourself with the general area geographically. Maybe get a little versed with the public transportation, or if anything, walk. Like I say, my favorite parts of travel was not when I was in the Serdal or in the tour bus. It was when I was in the streets and seeing the people and seeing the pedestrians and seeing how they live, and then like hanging out, going to school, going to work, hanging out at cafes. One good decision that during the Europe trip, I know it's a slight tangent, what we made when we were in the Czech Republic was that we did the walking tour. With the walking tour, we got to see more of the churches and see the bridge and see the cobblestones and see the old buildings. And believe it or not, we made mental notes to go back to certain places again if we liked it more than we did the first time. And sometimes the opportunity isn't there, but you have to make the opportunity. You gotta do your own due diligence, do your own research. But if anything, have the desire to go. I know that life's not easy and there's different responsibilities and obligations. And sometimes it's difficult to get time off from your job. But honestly, are you going to remember that job more or that travel experience more? When I was in grad school, my family, they went on several trips without me. And honestly, I hated it. Because it was one chance to go to these places, and sometimes they're not always the next time, or it's not as convenient, or the opportunity doesn't present itself as easily. But grad school was a temporary and necessary phase I needed to go to in order to have a better, opportunities in the rest of my life. A necessary evil, if anything. Another piece of advice, and you can take this with a grain of salt. Ideally, you would want to travel with someone, or at least a partner or a buddy. Ideally someone who knows where they're going and what they're doing. But if it comes to it, just go by yourself, like you're stronger and smarter and independent and more resilient than you realize. Because are you either going to travel by yourself or wait for an opportunity that never comes to travel with someone else? And I'm not talking big major international trips, even if it's just to a different city or a different state, or maybe something nearby. I'm not saying travel is the end all be all. I'm not saying it's the best thing in the world, but it should be on the table. It should be a part of your life. And I do recommend it. All right. I'll see you in part 3. And I'm very sure I'll wrap it up by then.